What are you expecting from those reports, and what will that tell us about the direction of the housing market?
Yeah, so the Case-Shiller index, the last print was 18% year over year. We're going to expect that to slow. Consensus says that's going to fall to about 17.5%. I'll actually take the under on that, so we might see something in the 16% year over year, or even in the 15%. That's a slowdown, but still very strong year over year.
All right, so the housing market is still relatively strong. It's just the growth is slowing down. It's not necessarily the housing market's taking a turn to the downside. That's basically what you're saying?
That's right. When we think about pricing, when we think about rent growth, that's definitely the case. We can look at something like new home sales. Admittedly, that's a lot less attractive picture. The last print there was 511,000 units on a seasonally adjusted annualized basis. That's probably going to fall to about 500,000 when that data comes out today. Could be as low as 485,000. Now, to put that in context, that goes back to about 2015 or 2016. That's to say that we're rewinding the clock about 5-6 years when it comes to the level of new home sales.
All right, I want to touch on some data points that you gave me. So, according to your data, the U.S. Housing market has a shortfall of about 1 million houses. I know some people would say 2 million, maybe even some people would say 4 million, but your data says about 1 million. We also have about 1.7 million houses under construction. So hypothetically, once those houses get completed, obviously supply chain issues have slowed down the construction, but once they're completed, does that mean, excuse me, the shortfall's over?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And when we say houses, we should clarify this means housing units, any type. And yes, if we're underbuilt by 1 million and you've got 1.7 million in the hopper, it really comes down to a question of population growth. And that's where we can look at what's happening both in terms of legal immigration and illegal immigration, just how many people are coming into the country, and how we're going to have to align the amount of housing we're making with our population growth.
All right, one other thing we have to talk about is rents for people that are renters. One of the things that we've seen that's been the stickiest when it comes to inflation is shelter inflation, which is basically the prices that people are paying to rent an apartment or rent a home. According to your data, rents are up 15% year over year. What does that mean for the housing market overall? Does that stop these people from eventually becoming home buyers? Does that make multifamily construction more attractive and actually solve some of our housing issues? What's the result of that?
Yeah, it definitely makes new construction more attractive, right? But I think on the flip side, you've got these, rate hikes, right? The Fed funds rate up to 3.25. Looks like the terminal rate could be in the high 4s or even the low 5s. That makes the cost of development go up as well. So while building has become more attractive because of rent growth, your financing costs have gone up significantly, and that makes it less attractive. As far as people moving into home ownership, really we should look at renting and home ownership as sort of a symbiotic relationship. People move throughout the life cycle. They move in terms of their housing preferences and what they want. Now, admittedly, we certainly see 2-4 year fluctuations in this, but those are really more determined by mortgage rates. When mortgage rates go down, you see move outs to own. That's to say people moving out of rented housing into owned housing, and you see that backfilled by new household formations. Right now, that's probably going to start to run in reverse as mortgage affordability declines, and people who otherwise would be an owner end up renting longer.
So, Brad, we got to get going, but I have to ask you the question I think a lot of people are asking. Are home prices actually going to go down in the near future? I mean, with rising rates, a lot of people, as you mentioned, can't afford to buy a house unless the prices themselves go down.
Well, I think we're going to see listing prices certainly adjust. Whether or not something like the Case-Shiller index, a transaction-based index, ends up showing a negative print, I think is certainly questionable. But we'll really have to see just what happens with population growth and whether these Fed rate hikes are really going to slow down development. Again, 1.7 million housing units under construction. We're still doing starts, total housing starts at 1.5 million on a seasonally adjusted annualized basis. So when you compare that to population growth, which there really is a question mark around, we know we've probably added about 2 million people in the last 2 years, but there may be another 2 million people on the illegal immigration front. That's the population of Oregon, if you put that into context. So there's a lot of pieces moving at the same time, both housing construction, current shortfall, and population growth.